10 Toyotas built in the 1990s are worth more money today than they cost new. And over the next half hour, I'm going to give you all 10, what the good ones are actually selling for right now, and the specific detail on each one that decides whether you're looking at a $12,000 vehicle or a $50,000 vehicle. Not a guess. Recorded sale prices from public auction results with the reasons underneath them. I've had more 90s Toyota straight sixes apart than I can honestly put a number on, and I've watched this market go from junkyard money to serious money in about a decade. So let me put the uncomfortable part on the table first, because it shapes everything that follows. These things are expensive partly because they were good, but they're also expensive because almost none of them are left. And the reasons there are almost none left were not accidents. Some of it was salt. Some of it was tuners. Some of it was a warranty program that quietly removed hundreds of thousands of trucks from the road. And one whole category on this list is expensive because of a law that was written in 1988 by people who were not thinking about you at all. A few things to hold on to while we go. At number 4, there's a pickup that Toyota paid its owners to hand over so it could be scrapped at a rate of 1.5 times book value, and that program is a direct reason the survivors cost what they do. At number 2, the difference between an average example and a great one comes down to a single option box that only about a third of buyers ticked. And number 1 has now crossed $240,000 at auction, which is roughly 6 times what it cost new. We're counting down from 10. Here's the thread that runs through every one of them. Toyota in that era overbuilt things on purpose, not by a little. The engines were designed with margin left in the metal for durability, and it turned out that margin was also headroom for power. The trucks were designed for markets with no paved roads and no dealer within 400 miles. The company was making so much money selling Camrys and Corollas that the engineering side got to be thorough in a way that no accountant would sign off on today. And every single vehicle on this list is now priced according to how much of that leftover margin it has and how many of them survived long enough to be wanted. Margin plus scarcity. That's the whole formula. Number 10 is the strangest thing on the list and the cheapest way into a genuinely unrepeatable machine. The Toyota Century, second generation, from 1997. It has a 5-liter V12, the only 12-cylinder engine ever fitted to a mass-production Japanese car. It was hand-finished, built for company chairmen and government ministers, and it was never sold here. On the collector data, second-generation Centuries average around $16,000, with the top recorded sale at $48,000. Landed, titled examples in the States have been advertised around $20,000 to $22,000. A V12 limousine for Camry money. There's a catch coming on this one, and it isn't the engine. The catch is parts, and it leads straight into number 9, which has the same problem and a much better reason to accept it. Number 9 is the Toyota Aristo V300. Here's the short version. It's a 4-door Supra. The JZX100 Aristo from 1997 carried the VVT-I version of the 2JZ GTE twin turbo, the same engine family fitted to the Supra RZ of the same era, rated at the Japanese domestic ceiling of 280 horsepower, which everybody in the industry understood to be a polite fiction. By the way, if you drive a Toyota and want to keep it running for hundreds of thousands of miles, what you do before something breaks matters far more than most owners realize. That's why I put together the 500K Mile Car Care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your Toyota last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot mechanic upsells that quietly drain your wallet. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera, or grab it from the first pinned comment below. Outside Japan, you got this car as a Lexus GS, and Lexus never put the turbo engine in it. The GS400 got a V8 instead, so the only four-door Toyota ever built with a 2JZ GTE is this one, and it only exists in right-hand drive. Current asking prices on the export market run from about $5,000 for a tired one to around $28,000 for a clean low-kilometer car, with the average sitting in the high teens. A titled San Diego-ready V300 was listed at $12,500. Think about what that means next to the engine's reputation. You're buying the same block, the same turbos, the same tuning headroom that people pay six figures for in a coupe, and you're getting 4 doors and a back seat with it. The rarest one is the Vertex edition with the 6-speed Getrag manual. Almost every Aristo is an automatic. If you find a factory manual, you've found the one that gets written about. Which brings up the obvious question. If the Aristo is the sensible way to get that engine, what's the fun way? That's number 8. Number 8 is the Toyota Chaser JZX100 Tourer V, and 2026 is its year. The 25-year clock has now rolled through the entire production run, which ended in 2001, so every JZX100 ever built is legal to import. That's why prices are moving right now, rather than 5 years from now. The Tourer V is a rear-drive 4-door with a 1JZ GTE, 2.5 liters, single turbo on this generation, and the same understated 280 horsepower claim. Japanese side listings run from about $8,000 to $12,500 before you pay for the ocean, the duty, and the compliance. Manual cars command a serious premium over automatics, and always will. Small honesty note. One reference I trust says the Tourer V manual is the R154 gearbox. Another says W58. Those are not the same transmission, and it matters if you're buying parts. I lean R154 on the turbo cars, but I'd want the box code off the case before I spent money, and I'd tell you plainly rather than pretend I'm certain. Stop and look at the pattern for a second, because it explains 3 of the 10. Everything I've covered so far is expensive for a reason that has nothing to do with how it was built. The Century, the Aristo, the Chaser. These were ordinary used cars in Japan a decade ago, and they're appreciating in America because of a calendar. That's it. Nothing about the car changes on its 25th birthday. From here on, the list gets more familiar, and the numbers get considerably larger. And I'll come back to that calendar later on because there's a name attached to it and a reason it exists that most people have never been told. Remember the truck at number 4 that Toyota paid to have destroyed? That one's still coming. Number 7 is the Celica GT4, sold here as the All-Trac Turbo. This is the only production car Toyota ever built to homologate a World Rally Championship entry, and the cars underwrote 4 drivers' titles between 1990 and 1994. All-wheel drive, a turbocharged 2-liter 4 making around 230 horsepower in export trim, a viscous center coupling, and a Torsen rear differential. America got the ST-185 through 1993, and then Toyota stopped. We never received the later ST-205 at all. I've never seen a clean official explanation for why, and I'm not going to invent one. My read is that the exchange rate of the mid-90s made an already expensive Celica impossible to price against a Camry. But that's me reasoning, not Toyota telling anyone anything. I'm also going to be straight about values here, because this is the one item on the list where I don't have clean average data I'd stake anything on. Clean, unmodified all-track turbos have moved well up into the teens and 20s in the Japanese market homologation editions, including the 5,000 cars built specifically to satisfy the rulebook, none of which came here. Trade far above that. The spread is enormous, and the market is thin. Treat any single sale as an anecdote. The one thing I will state flatly: check the floor pan before anything else. The sound deadening in these traps water, and floor perforation is the structural failure that ends them. Lift the carpet every time. Number 6 is the third generation 4Runner, built from 1996 through 2002, and it's the clearest example on this list of the book being wrong. Look up a 1996 4Runner in the standard used car guide, and you'll be told it's worth about $3,600 in good condition. Meanwhile, clean third gens routinely trade around $15,000, multiple examples have sold above $40,000, and one went past $50,000 at a major auction. The guide is averaging a generation of beaten-up commuter SUVs. The market is pricing the handful that weren't beaten up. What makes one worth 10 times the other is drivetrain and originality. You want the 3.4-liter V6, 183 horsepower, 217 pound-feet, and the reputation for going past 300,000 miles on nothing but oil and belts. You want four-wheel drive. If you can find one, you want the 5-speed manual, which disappeared after 2000. And you want either the electronically locking rear differential or the multi-mode four-wheel drive setup that arrived on the Limited for $99 and became standard across the range for the last 2 years. That's 6 down, and we're into the heavy end. Before we go further, if this is the kind of breakdown you want more of, subscribe. That's all I'll ask. Now number 5. And then the truck I flagged at the start. Number 5 is the Toyota pickup, the 5th generation truck sold here from 1989 until the Tacoma replaced it for 96. In the rest of the world, it's a Hilux. In America, it's just the Toyota. And for a certain kind of buyer, it's the last honest small truck. The engine you want is the 22RE, 2.4 liters, fuel injected, single overhead cam, about 116 horsepower, which sounds like a joke until you understand the thing was designed to run at wide open throttle in third gear for 20 years in places with no mechanic. There was also a 3-liter V6, which is less loved. Four-wheel drive trucks trade at a very significant premium over two-wheel drive. There's a detail worth knowing that most sellers won't mention. From 1991, some of these trucks were built in Fremont, California, and some were still coming from Japan. You can tell them apart instantly. A VIN starting with 4T is North American built. A VIN starting with JT is Japanese built. Buyers argue about whether it matters. What I'll say is that it affects how people bid, and it costs you nothing to look at the plate before you make an offer. Clean, straight, rust-free examples are asking $8,000 and up, with good ones well into the teens and the exceptional survivors far past that. Rusty ones are still cheap, and there's a reason for that, which is exactly where number 4 comes in. Number 4 is the first generation Tacoma, 1995 and a half through 2004. And this is the entry I most want you to understand, because the price of these trucks was set by a corporate decision rather than by the market. The trucks themselves are simple and excellent. 3 engines, a 2.44, a 2.74, and the 3.4 V6 with 190 horsepower, the same 5VZ FE that made the 4Runner immortal. Toyota even sold a dealer-installed supercharger that took the V6 to 254. Average recorded sale price across the whole first generation now sits at about $18,500, and a 2004 Extra Cab TRD Off-Road sold for $50,000 last December. A rough one is still $4,000. Here's the part people repeat wrongly. These trucks used a fully boxed frame with poor drainage. Water got in, sat, and rotted them from the inside out, which is a very different thing from surface rust. In 2008, Toyota launched what it called a customer support program, and it went out of its way to say that this was not a recall, covering roughly 813,000 trucks from 1995 to 2000. It extended frame corrosion coverage to 15 years with no mileage limit, and if the frame couldn't be repaired, Toyota would buy the truck back at 1.5 times Kelley Blue Book retail in excellent condition, regardless of what condition the truck was actually in. Owners were getting checks that made no sense against the truck sitting in the driveway. A $5,000 or $6,000 pickup turning into $15,000. And those trucks did not go back into circulation. I went looking for how many were actually bought back and destroyed, and I could not find a published figure from Toyota. I don't think one exists publicly. Anyone who quotes you a hard number on that is guessing, but the direction is not in doubt. A very large number of the cleanest surviving frames in the Salt States were removed from the world at once, permanently, by the manufacturer, and everything left over got more valuable. Two more things. If your truck is a 2001 through 2004, the buyback was never on the table for you. Frame replacement only. And the whole 15-year window ran from the truck's original in-service date, so it closed years ago for every single one of them. The generosity everybody remembers had an expiry date printed on it from day one. Let's take stock, because the last three are different in kind. Everything up to now has been a working vehicle whose value came from surviving. What's left are three cars that were expensive and special when they were new, and are now considerably more expensive than they were new, which is a much rarer thing than the internet suggests. Number 2 is where the option box I mentioned at the start decides everything. And number 1 is the six-figure car that made everyone stop laughing at Japanese classics. Number 3 is the MR2 Turbo, the SW20, sold here from 1991 to 1995. Mid-engined, rear-wheel drive, 2-liter turbocharged 4 making 200 horsepower in US trim, and a shape that got it called the poor man's Ferrari, which was funny when it was true and stopped being funny about 5 years ago. Average recorded sale price for a Turbo SW20 is now just under $25,000. An original 1995 car with 67,000 miles sold for $61,750. The 1995 model year is the one everyone chases, because so few were built before Toyota pulled the car from the US market. Now the honest bit. The highest recorded sale in this market is $125,000 for a 1991 Turbo. I have no good explanation for that number. It is wildly out of line with everything around it, and I'm not going to build a story about the market out of one result. The lowest recorded sale in the same data set is a bit over 7,000. When a market has that kind of spread, what it means is that condition and originality are doing almost all of the work, and averages are close to meaningless. One practical warning specific to this car. The early cars had genuinely twitchy handling that Toyota revised twice during production. And a modified SW20 with cheap coilovers and an unknown tune is a completely different proposition to an original one. Original is worth the premium here more than on anything else on this list. Number 2 is the Land Cruiser, the FJ80, built from 1991 to 1997. and the last one sold here with a solid axle at both ends. 4.5 liters, inline 6, 212 horsepower, coil springs all round, full-time 4-wheel drive, and a chassis engineered for places where a breakdown is a serious problem rather than an inconvenience. Recorded sales average around $28,000. One valuation source puts the average nearer $23,500 and reckons it slipped slightly over the past year. Those two figures disagree, and when that happens, I take the lower one and tell you it's contested rather than quoting the flattering one. Here's the option box: factory front, center, and rear locking differentials. The triple locked spec. For the 1997 model year, Toyota sold just under 15,000 Land Cruisers in the States, and only 4,875 of them left the factory with the diff locks. That's about a third. Within the special editions, it's tighter still. Of the 3,946 40th anniversary trucks, 1,604 had the locks, and of the 2,616 collector editions, only 822 did. Same body, same engine, same badge. One has 3 yellow buttons on the dash and one doesn't. And that single distinction now separates a nice truck from a truck that people fight over. Triple locked 97s have been advertised near $37,000 with 169,000 miles on them. Miles genuinely do not matter much on these. Rust and lockers matter enormously. And number 1 is the A80 Supra Turbo. And everything you've heard is true, including the parts that sound made up. Built from 1993, withdrawn from Canada in 96, and from the US after 98. 3-liter twin turbocharged inline 6, the 2JZ GTE, 320 horsepower here, and a claimed 276 in Japan. Sequential turbos, so the small one is doing the work down low, and the big one takes over up top, which is why peak torque runs from 1,300 RPM all the way to 4,500. Double wishbones front and rear. It'll stop from 70 miles an hour in 149 feet, which was supercar territory at the time, and is still respectable now. The engine is the legend, and it deserves to be. The bottom end was built with so much margin that 700 horsepower is achievable without opening it up, and people have taken the architecture past 2,000. That's the over-engineering thesis in one component. Toyota built an iron block 6 to a durability standard, and the tuning world discovered it had accidentally been given a race engine. The numbers today. Recorded sales for the twin-turbo A80 average just over $98,000. The highest recorded sale is $242,000 for a 1998 Turbo in January of this year. A 1997 6-speed with 11,000 miles brought $152,845. Even the naturally aspirated cars, which everyone dismissed for 20 years, now average in the 60s. But watch the spec, because the spread here will hurt you. The lowest recorded twin-turbo sale is just over $30,000. This July, a genuinely lovely one-owner car with 26,000 miles failed to sell on a high bid of $60,500 because it was an automatic, manual or automatic, original or modified, and documented history or not. Those 3 questions are worth more than $100,000 between them on the same model year. Now let's talk about why several of these cost what they do, because it isn't the market and it isn't the engineering. 3 of the 10 cars I just described are illegal for you to buy new in country at any price, and become legal the instant they turn 25 years old. Not safer, not cleaner, older. The car doesn't change. A Chaser built in November of 2001 is contraband in October and legal in November, and the only difference is which side of a date it sits on. You've been told this rule is about safety and emissions. Here's where it came from. In the 70s and 80s, there was a thriving gray market. You could buy a car overseas, bring it in, get it converted to American standards, and register it. And by the mid-80s, something like 67,000 vehicles a year were coming in that way. Some sources say 69,000. I'll use the lower figure. A bill appeared in Congress in 1985 to shut that down. Among its supporters were the North American arm of a German luxury manufacturer that was losing sales to its own cheaper overseas cars and the National Association of American Automobile Dealers. It became the Imported Vehicle Safety Compliance Act of 1988. Vehicles now had to carry factory certification to federal standards or be old enough that the standards didn't apply. 25 years became the cutoff. Conversions had to be done by registered importers posting bonds, and getting a model federalized meant crash testing cars, plural, which nobody except a manufacturer can afford. The effect was total. Imports went from around 67,000 a year to roughly 300 within a decade. Now, the concession, because it's real and I'm not going to skip it, regulators did find genuine defects in gray market conversions. Bumpers that didn't meet spec, wrong lighting, speedometers still reading in kilometers. And studies at the time concluded a majority of those cars weren't actually compliant with anything. That was a real problem. If you're sitting there thinking, so the rule fixed something, you're not wrong. And I'd rather concede it than pretend. But look at what got chosen. There were other options on the table. Certify the converters, license the shops, inspect the work. What got written into law instead was a wall with a door in it that only manufacturers are tall enough to reach, promoted by the people whose sales the gray market was eating. The safety problem got solved in the way that happened to also solve a competitor problem, and the bill for that lands on you, decades later, every single time. The Aristo that costs $8,000 in Japan doesn't cost $8,000 here. And the difference isn't shipping, it's the queue. It's the exporter, the broker, the compliance paperwork, the flipper who bought it the week it turned 25. Every one of those people is getting paid out of a scarcity that a statute created and that no engineer, no buyer, and no safety inspector ever asked for. Nobody sat down and decided you should pay a premium for a birthday. It just fell out of a sentence somebody wrote in 1988 to protect a dealer network, and it's been quietly charging you rent ever since. You can't repeal it from your driveway, but you can stop mistaking the price for the value of the car and start reading it as what it is. A car plus a tax on a date. Here's the thing I actually find moving about this whole list, and it isn't the money. Every vehicle here is worth what it's worth because a group of engineers 30-odd years ago quietly built more into it than the job required. Nobody asked for a block that would take triple the factory boost. Nobody asked for a frame rated for terrain that 99% of buyers would never see. There was no marketing benefit. You can't put "we left extra metal in it" on a window sticker, and the people who made those decisions got no credit and are mostly retired now. They did it because that's what doing the work properly meant to them. And the market is a slow, dumb, honest thing. 3 decades later, having tried every alternative, it has come back around and put 6 figures on the exact cars where somebody chose the thorough option over the cheap one. That's not nostalgia. That's a verdict. It's the closest thing to a thank you note that engineering ever gets. And it arrives 30 years late, addressed to nobody in particular, which means the same test still works on anything you're thinking of buying today. Not the badge, not the reviews. Just Did somebody leave margin in this, or did they take it out? So here's how to use all that. In order. Decide what you're buying. A vehicle to use, or a vehicle to keep. Those are different purchases, and mixing them up is how people lose money. Then run this, in this sequence, on any 90s Toyota you're looking at. 1. Get underneath it with a flashlight before you discuss price. Frame rails, floor pans, spring hangers, tap suspect areas, solid metal rings, rotten metal thuds, and if a screwdriver goes through, walk. There's no cosmetic version of a rotten frame. 2. Confirm the drivetrain against what the market actually pays for. Manual or automatic. Four-wheel drive or two. Locking differentials or not. Turbo or naturally aspirated. Write down which side of each line this specific vehicle falls on. 3. Get proof it's original. Factory ECU, factory turbos, factory suspension, service records. A modified example isn't worthless, but it's priced on a completely different curve. 4. Do the arithmetic instead of trusting a gut feeling. Take the asking price. Add the deferred maintenance you can already see. Belts, bushings, seals, tires. If it's an import, add shipping, duty, and compliance. Now compare that total against real recorded sold prices for the same spec, not asking prices. Asking prices are a wish. Sold prices are a fact, and they're public. 5. If your total lands within a couple of thousand of the best comparable sale, you're the exit for somebody else's investment, not the entrance to your own. Let it go. There'll be another. Do the first step tonight. Go out to your own vehicle with a flashlight and a screwdriver and spend 20 minutes under the back half of it. By the time you come back inside, you'll know something about what you own that no valuation website can tell you. And if it's solid, you'll know you're holding one of the ones that made it. Now I want to hear the painful ones, not the win, the one that got away. The Land Cruiser you let go for $4,000 because the headliner was sagging. The Supra you passed on in 2009 because the asking price felt insane at $18,000. What was it? What did you take for it? And do you know what it's worth now? Post it. Somebody reading is about to make the same decision this weekend, and your regret might be worth more to them than anything I've said. And if you know more than I do on any of this, particularly the Celica values, where I told you plainly I'm working with thin data, or that gearbox code on the Chaser, come correct me. I read the comments properly, and getting a detail fixed by someone who's actually had one apart is one of the better parts of doing this. Subscribe if you want the next one. There's a thread here I deliberately left alone, by the way. Every so often, one of these cars sells for a number so far outside the pattern that it makes no sense, like that $125,000 MR2. I don't have a satisfying explanation yet. I've got a suspicion and I'm still digging, and when I can back it up properly, we'll go through it. Until then, check the frame, buy the boring one with the paperwork, and take care of yourself.